Hi everyone, my name is Pamela Nuri, Head of Expedition Operations at Noble Caledonia, and we have with us again for take two or part two of our archaeology series, Phoebe Olsen. Thanks so much for joining us again, Phoebe. Last time we did a talk right through the Bronze Age and the Isles of Scilly and some of the highlights that could be experienced anywhere in the world actually. And we also covered up until the Brochs. But this time we're going to go forward into Neolithic Orkney. So thank you so much for joining us again. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for having me back to continue to talk at you about archaeology.
Awesome. So we left off last time. We were about to jump into the Orkneys, and I'll just leave it right over to you to carry on our little archaeological journey through the Isles. Thanks. Over to you.
We're going to leave the Iron Age behind down in the Hebrides and head up to the Orkneys. And the Orkneys is really, it's just a Neolithic playground. It just has the most fabulous archaeology, Neolithic archaeology. So we're going back in time. So we went from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, and now we're going to go back to the Neolithic, to the new Stone Age. And we're going to go to the Knap of Howar. So the Napa Power was built approximately 3,600 years BC. So add another 2,000 years onto that for being ago. And this island alone is home to 60 archaeological sites, but this is the one that you want to visit. It has the earliest known dwellings in Orkney, but these are the oldest known standing buildings in Europe. Never to mind the oldest in Scotland, never to mind the oldest in Britain and Ireland. They're the oldest standing buildings in Europe. And wow, you can go in and stand in them.
Yeah, that is incredible.
We're allowed to do that, you know, it's just fantastic. As long as people are respectful of the archaeology, you're not climbing up and down and things, we will still be able to go and come up close and personal, not have to view things. Some things do need to be protected for their own good, and we have to stand back because even just walking across an area can start to erode or impact on the archaeology that is still below the ground. But it's nice, as always, to get up and close and personal to the archaeology as well. So they were built, like I said, 3,600 years ago. You have two buildings here. So you can see the larger building just in front of you, and that's the second building there to the right. And they were lived in by Neolithic farmers continuously for about 500 years. So maybe generation upon generation continuously using these buildings. One side was for habitation. The other side was a barn slash workhouse. You know, you were working in there. And the workhouse actually went out of use before the building. There is a small, I have a picture of it in a moment, but there is a small passageway between the two buildings. You could walk between the two buildings instead of having to go outside and back in the other door. But they blocked that entranceway there before this one went out of use. So at some point, the workhouse went out of use. They closed the passageway, continued living in the other building, and then the other building then went out of use after that. It was discovered in the 1930s. There was a huge storm. This was all covered over. It was a huge storm, and it revealed part of the front and a midden, which is fancy archaeology speak for rubbish pit. Mm-hmm. When we talk about middens, they're just bins, giant bins, and that's what they found. And then they started to excavate it. It was under 2 meters of sand, and then. What's nice about this is actually you're just walking down through a field. So earlier I showed you the little, so here we go. There's the little low entranceway. You just walk down into a field, down across the grass, poke in through the entranceway. Again, mind your head, go in and have a look around. And here's the little entranceway. So that's standing in one building and looking across into the second building. And that's how they would have moved between the two.
It's quite a thing, you know, it's not just a little mound of stones by any means. For the oldest buildings in Europe, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Oh, and like I said, so oldest standing buildings in Europe. I'm sure that there's probably contestation and there's some, but we're just in this date and whatever, but you know, broad strokes, it's the oldest one, and if you've seen it, you've seen it.
Let's go with that. Yeah.
Just go with that. Then honorable mention is this figurine here. So this is known as the Westray wifey. And it is, if you go to the Purewall Heritage Centre while you're up in the Orkneys, this is the oldest human effigy ever found in the UK. And you can go and visit. They call it the wifey, they think it's female, so very appropriate that you and I on International Women's Day will be looking at this, the oldest human effigy. And that's nice that she is in, or it is actually in, the place where they were found. So nice. They're not off in the British Museum, they're still there. This was found not in the Knap of Howar, but at Links of Notland, which was another site nearby. And that's who you can go and visit. I have a picture that I took, which is terrible, which is why I haven't put that up. It's only about this big.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for so much treasure being held in one central place where it's well protected and it's accessible to everyone in the British Museum. But also it's nice where there's a little bit of balance, and you can, take this pilgrimage all the way out, far-flung islands to get to these sites, and then also be able to access, some of the treasures there. So it's nice to have that balance, and that this Westray wifey is in location.
It is, and it's just such a lovely, tiny little local museum. It really is just, I think it's just one room, if I remember it correctly, and they're just display boards around the outside, and the Westray wifey's there sat in the middle. And it's right, although some people can't travel out to these places, we're lucky that we can go on cruises, and we can get to this. You'd have to take 2 ferries, I think, to get out to this island to go and see the oldest human effigy in the UK. So we are very lucky that we get to go to these places and see them. But I do think it's right, they should be in the place where they were found, unless you have to hike for 18 kilometers in order to see a thing. Then maybe you can bring it closer.
But there's going to be some rewards for the people willing to hike the 18 kilometers too. So it's nice. Yeah, nice to have
you got to work for your archaeology.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you can't. So Papa Westray then is the oldest, so 3,600, and then scooting forward about 400 years. So maybe as those buildings were coming to their decline, so they were occupied for about 500 years, last 100 years of their life, Skara Brae was being built. So Skara Brae is on mainland Orkney. It's one of Orkney's most visited sites. And even though it's its most visited site, it is for a reason. We're not avoiding, it's not a tourist trap, it is genuinely of interest, and it is fabulous. So they are again settlement dwellings, people were living in them. There's a collection of about 8 dwellings together, and similarly to the Napa Power, they were exposed during a storm. So it was in 1850, a large storm uncovered some of these buildings, and subsequently they were excavated. I think there was one in 1860, and then later on in the early 1900s, around 1930. Did you see on Netflix the film The Dig about Sutton Hoo? You should.
Okay.
So Sutton Hoo
reference, thank you.
Sutton Hoo was a ship burial down in England, and it was excavated in the 1930s. And the film is, I think Ralph Fiennes is in it. And the film shows the excavation in the 1930s of this Anglo-Saxon boat burial. And the reason I mention it is that both Skara Brae and the Napa Power both had excavations done also around the 1930s. And if you watch The Dig, it's just a beautiful film anyway, if you watch it, it might give you a sense of what the digging conditions may have been like. Especially the bit where it's raining a lot and they have to bail out everything using buckets. I can attest to the fact that that bit is super accurate and has not changed up until the time that I was working in field work in archaeology. It will always flood, you will always have to bail it out with buckets. But just as a flavor, they're standing there in their waistcoats with their pipes, staring at the archaeology and deciding what they're going to do. And maybe you could imagine that and add some Orcadian accents and a lot more wind and rain to get a sense of what it might be like.
Yes.
So these 8 buildings, they were covered by sand, which protected even the contents of the building. So you have an unparalleled look at what day-to-day life would have been like in Neolithic Orkney. And that is, I have a couple, so there we go. This is this structure here. is one of the kind of more famous ones in Skara Brae. It's known as the oh my goodness, what do they call it? It's like the dresser. You know, if you've got a wooden dresser, and that's where you should put all your good teacups and everything on it. And the idea is that this might be one of them. Or again, go there, look at it, decide what you think it was, what they would have been doing there. Ooh, pardon. There we go. There's the dig.
Worth watching, if for no other reason than it's got Randolph Fines in it.
Exactly. Yeah, he's worth the look anyway, you know. And yeah, and they're all standing there in their tweed waistcoats, looking serious and mostly very damp.
Yeah, that's a great referral. You know, with the Skara Brae, it's one of those places. It's sort of accessible if you're going to if the trip includes the Orkney, you will go there, and it's quite accessible. It's one of those places that I will have had the opportunity to go to, 20 times, and you will go every time, because there's just something so special and alluring about the site. And I forget, the dates and the details and all the information. The guides on site are so fantastic. They bring it alive with so much information. I sort of zone out, and I just love looking at this in the context of the landscape, in the context of history and time. And it just so alluring, brings you back. Want to go back to that site every opportunity you can. It's absolutely fantastic.
Oh, I'm so glad it's not just me.
Yeah.
I love it. And yeah, and you were right to mention the local guides. I mean, I can go through these different sites and I study them and I get overviews of them. But when you are the guide and they are at the museum and they have spent so much time getting the minutiae out of this site, they are the ones to ask the nitty-gritty questions of. I'll be there to help out, I'll give overviews, and I will also be asking the guide questions, because they are the ones who really know every little detail about it, and they do their job so well, and they tell such fantastic stories, and are really engaging, which I really enjoy. Then our third site then in Orkney, so we've started the earliest standing building in Europe back in Napa Power, through Skara Brae a little bit later. Oh, there he is again, Mr. Fines. And now to the Ring of Brodgar on mainland Orkney. So this is a ginormous stone circle. So this is a photo that I took looking at some of the stones, and you can see them there. This was built towards the end. So Skara Brae was occupied, and towards the end of its occupation, that's when the Ring of Brodgar was constructed. It is part of the heart of Neolithic Orkney, which was designated as a UNESCO site in 1999. And I've got an aerial photo here of it, and now you can really see the scale of it. I mean, it is just astonishing. Again, you get to go inside it, walk around, go up close. There's a lot of graffiti that has been carved into the stones. Some of it is modern graffiti from the 20th century. Some of it is Viking runes. And then again, you play Spot the Archaeology, go and find the one that has, I'm not going to show you which one it is. Go find the Viking runes and see if you can see which one it is. And all around, it's kind of the kind of more modern fingerprints all over this truly ancient monument. The Vikings were going there going, hey, have a look at this. This is enormous. I'm going to carve my name on it. This is great. Thor was here. And then, in the 20th century, maybe some fellas were out shooting and they decided to come and put their mark on it as well. And it's just kind of archaeological sites visited throughout the centuries. I'm
having a chuckle because on this tour day, I mean, it's such a fantastic day that we tour around all these places. Often the weather up in Scotland can be, so-so Scottish weather, and it's sort of very windy and rainy. And so everyone piles back in the bus, and because everyone got wet before sitting at Skara Brae or whatever, they all start, it gets quite steamy in the bus, and then you get quite drowsy, and then you get to the Ring of Brodgar, and it's like, bing! And we all go for this big, long, nice, fresh walk outside in the wind, like wake up again. And it's just such a, it seems like local farmers just doing, having a little walk around. Like there's a lot of the locals seem to go there just for a nice little walk. I can't help thinking how novel that is.
Yeah, that is just your local walk when you need to stretch your legs of an afternoon. You get to go and walk around this. But, we're all the same. There are places here. I'm very lucky to live in a most beautiful part of the world, and it's not a monument as such, but we have a thing here called the Beacon, And it was just to warn people of this is where the entrance to Baltimore Harbor is. And it's just this big white pillar. And it's on all the postcards for this area. It's the place where people, when they come to Baltimore, walk up to the beacon. And that's where I walk every evening. It's a 5-minute walk from my house. And I just go up there, my headphones in, bit of fresh air before dinner time, and then home again. To me, it's perfectly normal, you know. But imagine if your perfectly normal was a Neolithic stone circle that's the 3rd largest in the world. That's Tuesday, you know. And it's the 3rd largest. It's the 3rd largest in the UK, and I think that means that it's the 3rd largest in the world, because again, stone circles not as popular elsewhere. The 2 that are bigger, one is Avebury, and there is literally a pub in the middle, and you can go for a drink in the middle of the stone circle. If you want to have a drink in the middle of this one, you can bring a flask. There is no pub. And even though we're looking at it now, we're saying, wow, this is really impressive. This is when I feel you need an archaeologist. So you're looking at the stones and you're going, this is impressive. You're looking at maybe you've already noticed the graffiti. Sharp eye, excellent. That's also impressive. The bit that is actually the most impressive is the ditch. So this is actually a henge, and a henge is an earthwork enclosure where you have a ditch and a bank. And we know they weren't defensive because they had the ditch on the inside, which means you'd be climbing up a short side, sliding down a long side, and then into the middle. No problems. Where if the ditch was on the outside, you'd climb into a ditch, have a big climb up the bank, and then to the inside. So we know they weren't defensive. So what on earth were they? So if you see here, we've got our lovely passengers walking along here, looking at the stones, looking for the runes that Phoebe absolutely promised were there somewhere. It's a great way to keep people quiet for half an hour, tell them to go find some. It's like, go look for some runes, and everybody gets super competitive. But right next to it, can you see this ditch here? Now that has been filled in over thousands and thousands of years, and they actually excavated part of it. And if I just move us over here, you can see how actually deep it was. So this was cut into, not only into the ground, it was cut through the bedrock to make this ditch. And we are in the Stone Age. What did they have? Wooden shovels and antler picks. And that's what they were using to excavate this. I mean, we'd struggle today with metal shovels, aside from anything else. And it's hugely deep. It's estimated that they shifted 11,000 tons, worth of material out of this. And it's a 380-meter long ditch. Probably took about 80,000 person hours to dig it. And I have a thing here. So if you imagine, if you had 100 people and they worked 10-hour days, because that's all you'd want to be working on something like this, and you did that for 80 days. Just to build this. You're not living in it. You're not defending yourself from anything. What are you doing? Why is this so important? So it's one of these things that you have a shadow of its former self there in the landscape. You can sort of see a little bit of a dip around there and you go, oh yeah, there was a ditch. But when you actually know the work that had gone into this, that clearly it was of huge significance.
Maybe the word ditch doesn't really, give the impression of it being as impressive as that. Use a better word for this to make it sound more grand, because that really is impressive.
I know, it just sounds like drainage works, doesn't it? It rains so much, it really shouldn't even be bothering. You just let it happen. So that's the thing that I feel makes this place truly spectacular. And they haven't excavated the inside of the circles. So again, it's one of these mysterious features. We still don't have exact dates for it. And then last but not least, up to the Shetlands, will I tell you a secret, terrible secret. When I first started working for Noble and started doing these tours up on the islands, I had a terrible problem of confusing the Orkneys and the Shetlands. And I just couldn't get it right in my head until a friend of mine said, imagine Shetland ponies running away. So that's what I have to picture. The Shetland ponies are running away. They're the furthest north. So if you've ever struggled with that, that's my favorite way of remembering. So we're up here with the Shetland ponies, and we're going to go to Jarlshof. So it's here on mainland Shetland. It is the most important prehistoric site within the Shetlands. Again, Shetlands absolutely chock-a-block full of archaeology, but this is the most important site. So we've had the Neolithic of Orkney, we've had the Bronze Age down in the Scillies, we've had the Iron Age and our Brocks up in the Isle of Lewis and the Hebrides, and now all of these elements are combined in one site. You can see it all in one place, which if you visit at the beginning of your trip, it gives you a kind of an overview of what elements you will be seeing later. And if you see it at the end, it's just a synthesis of everything that you visited thus far, and you're adding all the pieces together. It's like a final test. And then I stand in the middle and I point at different features, and everyone has to name which one it is. And if you don't get it right, you don't get to get back on the boat. Because I'm
very strict, Phoebe, very strict.
I know. I'm a terrible taskmaster. So it was continuously occupied from the Neolithic period up till the 1600s. It's just amazing. I call this place Archaeological Disneyland, because you can visit a pirate world, and then you can go visit Viking world, and then you can visit Bronze Age world, and it's all within like a 5-minute walk.
Amazing. Yeah.
Here's an aerial view of it. So what you have down here, you have your Neolithic period here. I've got my I bought my guide of Jarlshof with the map in it, because I find the little parts of it, they're so confusing. You've got down here, so the earliest dwellings start here, then you move into a Bronze Age settlement, and then they have a smithy here. Then you skip around the corner here, along up to this part where you have the Iron Age. So again, look, round houses, round, round, round. This is a broch. So again, you've been to Duncarloway, or you're going to Duncarloway, you can see that cut out broch feature. You know what the inside looks like, so you know what this would have looked like in its heyday. Again, round buildings. You've got a wheelhouse, another Atlantic dry stone structure, given its name because the inside looks like the spokes of a wheel. We're not hugely imaginative when it comes to naming things in archaeology. Then you have the Norse settlement. So the Vikings turn up 9th century and build this. What do you notice? Everything is rectangular. Yeah. So that's your kind of dividing line between nearly prehistoric and historic, is everything is circular up until the Vikings or earlier, the Romans turn up and make everything rectangular. Then you have a medieval farm, and then you have a laird's house then gets plonked down on top of it. Now, of course, everything wouldn't have been as exposed as it is now. They've excavated it. So these would have, again, just been big lumps and bumps in the landscape, and you would have been walking over them. For part of it, then, you're actually walking over the souterrain, so the underground stores, especially in the Bronze Age section. So you're walking on some grass, but underneath you there is a tunnel where they would have stored food to keep it cool, or just away from pests and things like that. The medieval farmhouse was built around 1200 and abandoned 1500. The new laird's house, 1580s. And again, it was a storm that exposed it in the 1890s. Exposed, again, you can see basically like it's been sliced off just there, just along where the beach is. It's like somebody's just come along and just sliced away the archaeology. And that's the force of the erosion. So this is my archaeological Disneyland. You just walk around the whole thing, again, with those amazing guides with their incredible depth of knowledge. You can tell you nearly about every single stone that's there.
On this side, the guides, this is where they dress up in sort of period costumes and whatever, which is not to suggest a Disneyland theme again, although it's kind of, kind of quirky. But they are, as you say, fantastically knowledgeable, highly educated guides. It's really, really adds so much to the visit.
Yeah, and the thing I like about it is that the small building off to the side is the visitor center, and the visitor center is tiny because the site really speaks for itself. Inside you have a model which has color coordinated. It's a model of the site that's color coordinated. So pink is all the Neolithic stuff, and then the Bronze Age stuff is in orange, and it helps you visualize a bit better if you're a visual learner. That really helps you understand the makeup of the site. And there are a couple of books for sale, of which I've probably bought each one available. That's where I spend all my money, Pam. All the books in these fabulous museums and stuff, and all these wonderful resources. But it's so small. There are a couple of artifacts, and that's it. The rest is all about the site itself, which I really like. There we go. So there's your...
Thanks so much, Phoebe. It's so nice to do that sort of round Britain, more or less, tour of all the archaeology of the region. Hold on a second. And so, Phoebe, tell us, in terms of the protection of these sites, and they're right by the ocean, as you said, it just gets bisected right there. How does it look? I mean, how's the chances of keeping these sites protected in the long term? And is there stuff people can do?
Well, like I said, a lot of these sites were discovered because of the coastal erosion. Basically, human beings have loved living next to the sea since the beginning of time. Why? Because it's full of resources, it's good for transport, good for trade. You can defend yourselves against these locations. So when we're traveling around Britain and Ireland on our cruises, and we're seeing all these fab sites, a lot of them are coastal, and they are some of the most important for that region. But yes, they are at risk. They have been exposed due to storms, and maybe they were exposed due to storms a long time ago, 1890 for this one, 1930 for the Napa Power, but they were quite freak storms, and they are becoming more prevalent due to climate change. So what we're seeing is a rise in sea level, and then disruptive weather patterns and increased storm action. And it's, like I say, it's bisecting, it's cutting away. Like you can see here on Jarlshof, it's just a big slice has been taken off. And when we visit there, you can see the wall that they have built to try and protect it. But what we can do, there are initiatives like this one, so SCAPE, which is Scotland's Coastal Archaeology and Problem of Erosion. And there is so this was set up by the government, and it is about monitoring the heritage of your area. And that's how some sites have been identified as being particularly important or particularly at risk, and then they are investigated. There is an English version called Citizen, and this is Coastal and Intertidal Zone Archaeological Network. And this is fantastic. So if anyone is there in the UK and you, like me, are living next to the sea, you go for your walks along the coast, you can download an app onto your phone from Citizen and take pictures of things that you feel are at risk. So I'll just shift us over, and actually you can see here, there's a feature here, obviously quite a relatively modern feature. This is not prehistoric, it's made of brick. But you can see they're taking a photo here of it. Maybe there's been a storm, and after the storm you're out for a walk when it's safe to do so, and you notice something has been, maybe something has slid off, maybe there's been a small landslide, and you can see something exposed. Take a picture, send it to them, and they'll be able to say, oh, no, we didn't know that was there. We will now send someone down to check on it. Or we do know what that is, and now we see that it is being eroded faster, and we might take steps to either protect it or record it if we can do so. So that's a nice way that we can be involved in the protection of our archaeology, particularly on the coasts.
Thanks so much, Phoebe. That's such a nice way that people would be able to get involved in, well, just protecting some of the stuff around there, but also all around, even when we're on tour, maybe. That's really, really great. Phoebe, thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful tour around the whole area, around the UK and Ireland. So yeah, it really gives us that little bit of excitement to get back out there again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, cheers.
Bye-bye.